Well, Mark, there's no doubt that last month's historic general election result here, when more nationalist MPs were elected to Westminster than unionist MPs for the first time ever, put huge pressure on the DUP to get Stormont back up and running. Don't forget, with that party no longer holding the balance of power in Westminster, this assembly behind us is effectively their last major power base, so they needed to get that back up. But don't forget as well that Sinn Féin also saw their vote share decline in last month's general election. And the general message perceived to be coming from voters last month to all Northern Ireland politicians was that they wanted them to put their disagreements aside and to get back to work.
So what's the significance of the agreement itself then?
Well, first of all, the significance is for the Northern Irish people. For 3 years, Stormont has been in the deep freeze, and during that time, public services here have significantly declined. Nurses are on strike over pay, A&E waiting times have gone up a lot, education is in disarray, and the hope is that when politicians get back into this building behind me from 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, lubricated with money, more money from Westminster, that they will be able to start putting right those problems. But the second significance is for the future of the United Kingdom Union, in particular Northern Ireland's long-term place in it. Now that has been put under huge strain by Brexit, and the prospect of a return to direct rule from London, which could have happened if these politicians hadn't got this assembly back up and running, would have put that under even more strain. Now, the leaders of the two parties have made serious concessions to get this deal up and running. Sinn Féin, in terms of allowing this mechanism called the principle of concern to survive. This is effectively a mechanism which allows one side, and it has traditionally been the DUP, to veto decisions, and the DUP in terms of allowing the Irish language to be an official language of Ireland. But I caught up with the two leaders of those two parties earlier today, and I asked them how happy they really were with this outcome, and also how sustainable this deal really is.
On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm at a 10 of happiness in that we have a sufficient basis to go back in to the executive.
The issue about the petition of concern, that's far from ideal from your point of view.
No,
it's still able to be collapsed. It's not independently adjudicated. Isn't that a concern for you that this could be more fragile than a...
Well, no, I'm not in a place of concern. I'm in a place now of optimism and determination. But you're right. We wanted fundamental reform of the petition of concern. We wanted the Human Rights Commission to be the arbiter as to whether or not people's rights are being impinged on. And we shared that petition with 3 other parties. The DUP didn't have that view. And I very much regret that both governments chose to back away from the fundamental reform that needed to happen. But that said, there has been a level of reform which I think will be helpful.
She also told us that she was 10 out of 10 satisfied with today. Doesn't that tell you that actually your side has made more of the concessions to get this place up?
I think Mary Lou is a very good spokesperson and a very good saleswoman and a very good spin maker as well. You will note that the DUP was out last night saying that they would recommend this deal as a fair and balanced deal. It has taken to now for Sinn Féin to say the same.
It doesn't. We've been talking to some unionist voices today who are deeply pessimistic about the future, and they see this step as just one more step on the road of decline. What would you say to those people?
Well, I can understand why they would say that, but I mean, what they should do is look at the fact that this is a cultural construct, if you like, in terms of the Office for Identity, then the Irish Language Commissioner, then the Ulster British Commissioner. It's a holistic approach to culture and identity and language. It's not one that puts Irish language over anything else. English is still the working language of Northern Ireland. So it's important that they reflect on that. I can understand where they're coming from when they feel, after Brexit and after a whole range of issues, that they feel under threat. But I think when we get back into Stormont and start delivering for those people, they will see that it's the right thing to do.
Well, to assess the significance of today's agreement, we have Jonathan Powell, Chief of Staff to Tony Blair and former Chief Government Negotiator on Northern Ireland, here in London. Welcome. And in Stormont, Claire Hanna from the SDLP, who in December was elected MP for South Belfast. Jonathan, if we could start with you. Lots of high principle in this paper, but it's about low politics, really, the lessons of December and the direction of travel of the province politically.
Yes, I think it's unalloyed good news. After 3 years, they've finally got the institutions back up and running again. And the absence of the institutions was a real problem. It was a problem for public services. It was a problem for the peace process itself. It could be undermined by those dissident terrorists unless it was moving forward. And it's good news because of Brexit, because now there'll be a Northern Irish voice on Brexit.
Claire, Hanna, if we could bring you in, I mean, in a sense, you personify that change, having won your seat. But of course, the Assembly behind you was elected in 2017. And if you like, was at a different point in Northern Ireland's political story. Do you think that Assembly can now work effectively for the remainder of its life?
Oh, well, of course it can if the mindset changes and if the will is there. There's no, genetic reason that we can't make good governance work. As you've said, there's nothing in that deal that couldn't have been done 3 years ago. The only material change is that the two larger parties got a bad election last month. And it's fair to say this isn't a rejoicing in the street moment for people as such, but people are relieved that we're going to have some of the protection of devolution up.
When you started that answer, you said it can work if the mindset changes. What exactly are you looking for in terms of changed mindset?
Well, I suppose it's the basic. That it isn't rocket science. We need to do partnership. We need to do compromise, and we need to do power sharing. A lot of it is about just working in the common ground for the things that actually affect people's lives. And I listened to your introduction there with the two, I suppose, putative first and deputy first ministers talking about the identity commissioner and those things. To be honest, the thing that people are talking to me about in the last couple of weeks and out of the deal is the impact on health. It is the childcare strategy. It is what we're going to do about climate change. It is about university places. And to be honest, those are the things that we were negotiating on as any opportunity we got over the last few years. And I think if people try and focus their minds on those things rather than the identity issues on which we tend to diverge, then yes, the place can work. And it should work and it needs to work. And I don't think people will tolerate it not working if people don't, as I say, get into the right frame of mind.
In terms of the tide of history, Jonathan, the DUP agreed to this first. They were perceived to have been weakened in December in a way that perhaps we didn't quite see quite to the same degree with Sinn Féin, although their vote did fall as well. Has the DUP had to bend more to get this back?
No, I don't think this is actually a zero-sum game. To be honest, I think this is much more about the timing of the agreement than the substance. This agreement could have been agreed 3 years ago. The reason it's agreed now is that the DUP is not there supporting the Tory government. The Tories don't need them anymore. And because they didn't want to have another election. Neither the DUP nor Sinn Féin would welcome election. Claire's party and the Alliance Party would have, had the election gone ahead on Monday, had it been called on Monday, the SDLP would have done very well and the Alliance Party would have done very well. So it was for those political reasons they went for an agreement now and both sides moved.
Claire, you mentioned some of the issues that you'd really like to see moving again. Obviously, there was a strike in the health sector in Northern Ireland. It's an issue very much at the front of people's consciousness. What about Brexit? Can the question of the border get successfully dealt with there in a devolved context, or will that put great strains again on the machinery?
Well, Brexit puts huge strains on relationships in Northern Ireland because it forces all of the things we need to talk about less around identity, the border, sovereignty. It forces all that back into our everyday conversation, and that's the fundamental problem with Brexit for this part of the world. But yes, I mean, we are now in a phase where the withdrawal agreement is through. We are dealing with limiting the damage. So yes, an assembly is going to be vital for that. History, I suppose, will look back and see how much better we could have done if we had some coherence and some formal way for Northern Ireland to express its views. And in that period the business community stepped in, and as you said yourself, the health unions and health activists stepped in to really ensure the parties had to sign up to this deal. But yes, the deal mandates a Brexit committee at a minimum, where we will start to try and shape the protocols as best we can to limit the damage of Brexit. But there's no way of avoiding the damage of Brexit, unfortunately.
Jonathan, I heard you pointing out earlier today in another interview that for now this is a first, in the sense that all of the parties are now arrayed on the same side, in the sense none of them like the Boris Johnson package for Brexit. But what does that mean in practical terms? I mean, Claire was just talking about the committee, how that might... I mean, Are they going to line up and oppose it? Are they going to try and get Boris Johnson to rewrite it? How does it work?
Well, that's one of the less commented bits about the agreement, but I think it's very interesting. They have a seat at the table in terms of the negotiations as it relates to Northern Ireland, and the government has agreed to try and address some of their concerns. The DUP in particular have concerns about this border that's been put between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom. They now have a voice in these negotiations that will continue from the end of January through at least to the end of this year, where they will be able to address what happens in the new relationship with the EU. Because the Good Friday Agreement has been under threat from two things: the institutions being out for the last 3 years, and by Brexit, questioning the border, questioning identity again. We've now solved the point of the institutions, they're back up and running, and now Northern Ireland has a voice on Brexit, and they all agree they don't like Boris Johnson's deal, and they can do some things to change not the Brexit deal itself, but the deal, the new relationship with the EU. Now they have a voice at the table.
We did hear some things in the run-up to the election about possible civil disobedience, blockading ports to oppose the Irish Sea border. Is that sort of thing really on the cards, or will it all be constitutional politics now the executive is up and running?
I certainly hope it will be political, but you have to remember where this all started in 1913 with the UVF and then the mutiny of the British Army. This didn't actually start with the IRA, it started with loyalists and unionists who were concerned about being pushed into United Ireland. Now we have the numbers pushing in the direction of United Ireland. Those concerns on unionist and loyalist sides will be back there again.
Claire, in terms of the big Irish question, the one that comes back again and again, there is now a majority of nationalist MPs elected from the north of Ireland. But does that or doesn't that equate sooner or later to a border poll in your view? A vote, I should say, on the future of a united Ireland?
There's no doubt that the conversation's happening, that the dynamic has been changed, and that was Brexit. Many people who weren't in any way really thinking about Irish unity in the short to medium term are now doing, because of the push factor of, I suppose, an increasingly right-wing government in the UK, isolationist politics, and I suppose the pull factor of rejoining the EU in the Irish Republic, a dynamic economy, a more outward-looking society. But as I say, the vast majority of people don't get out of bed thinking, how does this affect the union? How does this affect Irish unity? They're just thinking, what about my kid's school? What about the waiting list that I'm on? And I think whatever your constitutional preference, it's about making the place work in the short to medium term.
Thank you very much, Claire. Hanna. Jonathan Powell, very brief last word. Is this a significant, however small, step closer to Irish unity today, or is that not part of the equation?
I think there is a real possibility, for the first time in my lifetime, of a united Ireland. You've seen the numbers moving in the polls. I think that they will be living in a united Ireland in economic terms from now on, and that will push people further in the direction of united Ireland in political terms. This is good news today because it means that Northern Ireland has a voice.